Hey everybody, and welcome back to part 2 of Yakuza the Review series. And this one is a doozy, so let's just get right into it, shall we? So just so you know, this is going to be a long recap, mainly because one of the bigger complaints that I got from the last video was I didn't go too much in detail with the story. I kind of just blasted through it. So if you want to skip the entire recap of the story, just go to this time code here and we'll start out from there. So, that good? Awesome. Now, on with the show. The story begins, funnily enough, in 1980's Kamurocho, with a detective snooping around when he comes across a gunfight in progress. And during this, we see none other than Shintaro Kazuma from the last game, seemingly gunning down these people with no remorse nor hesitation. As this is going on, we find the detective stumbling across a woman and her child who is about to jump out the fucking window with her babies in her arms. Kind of dark to start off, but oh well, this is Yakuza. We then fade back to the present to that same detective remembering the events of that night. We then fade to Kashiwagi mentioning that a war seems to be brewing, again, with the Omi Alliance, again. Not only that, but it also seems that a foreign mafia group has been coming around to attack and almost seems to be moving in on the Tojo clan's turf at an alarming rate. And keep in mind, this is a turf and clan still reeling from the events of a year ago thanks to, well, this jackass. Speaking of which, Kiryu is having some nightmares about that night still, almost haunted by the perceived failures of not being able to save Yumi nor Nishiki. But before any of that, he awakens to see that besides the horrific PTSD, Kiryu's life is not so bad. Has a nice little place for himself, a peaceful life, and is now living with his adopted niece Haruka. And it turns out they're going to the cemetery that day to pay their respects to their fallen friend and mother. But before that can happen, Terada, the 5th chairman of the Tojo clan, meets Kiryu there to speak with him about an official truce he wants to garner between the Omi Alliance and the Tojo clan in order to avoid any bloodshed. And before any of that can happen, Terada is mercilessly gunned down. Because of course he is. With his last remaining words, Terada asks if Kiryu himself can take the letter of truce to the Tojo clan. Oh, and don't worry about Haruka, she just kinda leaves. Yeah, 2 isn't really the kindest to our little orphan, I'll just say that now. Fast forward and we see Kiryu speaking to basically what's left of the Tojo clan, and he not only takes it upon himself to deliver the letter of peace to the Omi Alliance, but at the behest of Yaoi Dojima, Sohei Dojima's widow, Kiryu is also tasked to bring her son home, Daigo Dojima, in hopes that he himself will take upon the throne left behind by his father and, unfortunately now, Terada. Kiryu agrees, himself having a relationship with Daigo from taking care of him as a child, so easy, right? Well, no, it seems in the years past, Daigo has become a bit of a ruffian, but that's okay. That's nothing a little bit of the old Kiryu persuasion can't seem to fix. So after that happens, Daigo seems perfectly happy with helping Kiryu. In fact, he says he wants to come to Kansai with them. Doesn't really give him a choice, but there we go. On their way to Kansai, we get a bit more insight on Daigo and basically why he is today. It turns out that he not only picked a fight with the 2nd chairman of the Goryu clan, Ryuji Goda, he apparently was also set up by Ryuji that same time. And because of that, he was sent away for 5 whole years. So yeah, I guess he is a bit justified in being pissed off. Whilst in Kansai, Kiryu does also run into Ryuji himself, a seemingly stone-cold individual with a nasty streak to him. But after a bit of talking, Ryuji not only reveals that the Omi Alliance are getting set to war, something that makes the truce seem basically in jeopardy, but the entire town of Kamurocho is a target. So that's a nice thing to tell someone you just meet. Elsewhere, we are introduced to Kaoru Sayama, also known as the Yakuza hunter doing what else? Hunting Yakuza. When she gets a call from the chief saying that they need to put of basically all people, Kiryu in protective custody. Yeah, this Kiryu in protective custody. Alright. Kaoru seems surprisingly gung-ho when taking Kiryu in herself and getting in with him to basically investigate the Tojo clan, which he seemingly has a super deep hatred for. But while all that's happening, we officially meet the Omi Alliance chairman, and where we also find that the plan to take over Kamurocho was not their goal to begin with, at least not the head chairman's goal. Instead, it was a selfish goal done independently by Ryuji himself, and according to the head chairman, no one knew he was planning this to begin with. So as the chairman continues to explain the misunderstanding, Ryuji, being Ryuji, decides to come in, raise some hell, and kidnap Chairman Goda. And after the dust settles from a giant brawl, Kaoru finally comes and puts Kiryu in protective custody. Still doesn't sound right, does it? Elsewhere, we pick up with Date and Kawada now being formally introduced to us. They are in the middle of a meeting with Sudo, yeah, remember him? About the recent happenings in Kamurocho, as well as talking about a suspect from Club Stardust, Kazuki. Yeah, remember him too? But enough about that for now, because it's time for Kiryu to get shot! Almost. Yeah, well, coming to Sotenbori, he gets attacked by a mystery assailant who, instead of hitting him, hits Kaoru instead. So after bringing her to a bar named Aoi, Kiryu discovers that the bullet was not only too small to kill, but was basically shot too conveniently to miss, leading him to believe it's a clue of some kind. We then learn from an underground informant that the bullet was sent by one Takashima. And we also learn that Kiryu now has a giant bounty put on his head by Sengoku, which means Kiryu now has 3 Omi Alliance chairmen gunning for his head. And if that isn't bad enough, not only was Chairman Goda kidnapped, but now Daigo is as well. And it isn't even 5 o'clock yet. Once back in Kamurocho, Kiryu, with an ill-feeling Kaoru in tow, decides to leave her at the old Serena bar as he gets a call from Kashiwagi to meet at the Tojo HQ to discuss basically everything. While there, the clan asks if Shindo, of the Nishikiyama clan, yeah, apparently that clan is still around even though the guy is basically dead and their clan were a bunch of traitors, if he would protect Kiryu. He respectfully declined, since he blames Kiryu for killing Nishi, and I'll give him that one, so oh well. But I'm sure that won't be of any importance, so don't worry about him. Anyways, back to Kamurocho we go on, and we start learning more about Kaoru and her upbringing. Essentially, the whole reason why she joined the police force to begin with was because she overheard her adoptive mother talking about the Tojo clan, and from there she kind of put 2 and 2 together and thought that they killed her parents. So after a little this and that, we go and meet with our favorite one-eyed psychopath, Majima, who apparently not only owns Purgatory now, but a spiffy new construction company. Because that's just how Majima rolls, I guess. Of course, after Majima hears Kiryu out, agrees to help him, but only if he takes him on in a fight. And after an outcome less shocking than Western Tokusatsu fans making an ass of themselves, Majima agrees to rejoin the Tojo clan, but while this is going on, Majima confides in Kiryu that this whole thing kind of feels fishy. Nothing here really, feels right to him. And he does chalk it up to his immense mistrust of Terada. Now, why? Well, we'll get to that. Elsewhere again, we fade back into Kawada and Date confronting Kazuki about the foreign organization problem and how the issue of many illegals in Kamurocho are hampering the investigation. As soon as this is said, Kazuki basically bails out of the club with Date and Kawada in tow. Yuya, being, as confused as anyone else, tries to track down Kiryu and ask him for help. And coincidentally, as you expect, they all converge on a single building. There we find 2 Kazukis, and one reveals himself to be a spy. A Korean spy, in fact. Unfortunately, not much can be known after that because, one gets murked by Kaoru. Because that's just how she rolls. She's turning out to be a really great addition to this game, isn't she? But before they can even breathe, the cops surround them, making them retreat for the time being. Meanwhile, Kiryu and Date take Kawada and Kazuki, the real one, to a local doctor to heal up and hopefully take a brief respite. Date and Kiryu decide to take a breather and discuss all the events up to now. And we even learn a little bit about Kawada, who seems to have a bit of a stiffy for murking people left and right, especially Korean criminals. Well, back at the office, two big, burly Korean men can come in looking for someone named Kang, aka the fake Kazuki. And before leaving, punch Kaoru in front of Kiryu. So you know, a death wish. And it's here we finally give the foreign menace a name. The Jingguan Mafia. A mafia long thought destroyed and buried. Not only that, but Sengoku, you know, that guy, still has that giant bounty on Kiryu's head. And if that's not bad enough, well, Date is now wanted for murder of the fake Kazuki, since he was caught on the camera shooting a shot that seemed to be what did that person in. Kiryu then gets a call from Florence Kage. Yeah, remember him? Now working for the PD, calls Kiryu to hopefully give him some more info on where and how to help Date and Daigo. Yeah, almost forgot about that guy, huh? There we learn that a rat has infiltrated the system of police and gave Kamurocho police the video that incriminated Date to begin with. And while that's being explained, the lights suddenly shut off and there seems to be some intruders. We quickly find that they are the Omi Alliance. So, after Kiryu takes them out for a cup of tea, the power is restored, but the mainframe is now hacked. Luckily, Kaoru is a true gamer and is able to use her hackerman skills to save the day and finally find and rescue Daigo. By the way, need a breather yet? Yeah, don't worry, it gets wilder. We finally get into the deep dark about the Jingguan Mafia. We learn that the Tojo clan essentially ordered a genocide of them all due to how disgusting their tactics have become and how much damage they were causing to not only the clan but Japan at large. In fact, not only would they kill Yakuza, but they would not be above hurting civilians, especially women and children, which many in the Tojo clan, that's an absolute no-go. After being told this, Kiryu is ordered to return to the Tojo HQ for Terada's funeral, and suddenly are attacked by the Goryu, where Ryuji comes with a simple message. They have 3 days. 3 days to mourn, and after those days are up, the Goryu will set fire to all of Kamurocho and the Tojo clan. This leads to possibly one of my favorite moments in the franchise, so I'll just play it for you now. So after Majima beats the shit out of he unfortunately comes with more bad news. This entire attack was merely a diversion to get Kiryu away from HQ. Back at HQ, Kiryu discovers that Shindo of the Nishikiyama family has turned her back on the Tojo clan and is now part of the Omi regime to overthrow them all. Kinda shocked no one saw this coming, gonna be honest with you. Well, anyways, Shindo goes on to explain how all the officers and high-ranking officials of the Tojo clan have been taken out by Sengoku's men. We even get an admittedly gruesome montage of all the carnage. Pretty gory even for the PS2 era, I can't lie. So after Kiryu acquaints Shindo with his boot, there seems to be one conclusion, and one alone. The Tojo clan are going to war. Kaoru, seemingly getting angrier and more unhinged, takes Kiryu to Osaka at gunpoint to grill the chief about what happened that day of the raid. The chief admits that the police allowed the Tojo clan to go forward with the raid since, at the time, they were all but powerless against them. We also learned that of the 36 members killed that night, only 3 survived. That were, adults. And luckily, the chief knows one named Murai that lives in Osaka as they speak. But before Kaoru gets any ideas, the chief removes her from the case in fear that she may be in a bit over her head and how much she underestimates how disgustingly ruthless the Jingguan can be. A bar stop and a fight later, we can see the beginnings of something sparking within Kaoru and Kiryu. Quite adorable in all honesty after the shit Kiryu's gone through. Kinda deserves this. Kaoru the next day has a sneaking suspicion that she may have been the surviving child of that raid all those years ago. And after an admittedly weird money quest, we find Murai, who explains he only survived as long as he did due to ratting out everyone else in the mafia. We also learn that the child that survived that day was the child of the boss and the wife, so pretty important and pretty high up there. And it's here where Kaoru finds out that Shintaro Kazuma, the man who raised Kiryu, may have been the one to put the killing bullet in her father. But before any other answers can be drawn, the Jingguan arrive to kill basically everyone, and after Kiryu's famous tea party, the The gang dispose of themselves in order to keep silent, as well as Murai because, I guess, Kiryu finally decides to come clean and go into detail about that fateful Christmas night. On that day, he went to go find Shintaro Kazuma, who, due to him missing the holiday visit, noticed how strange she was acting. Thinking that he was in trouble, Kiryu followed Shintaro, hoping to find out what exactly was going on. Finding Kazuma with the boss of the Jingo-one at gunpoint, we hear that Shintaro was not going to kill any of them at all. In fact, he was going to let every single one of them live on a simple condition that they leave Kamurocho and never return. Kiryu, misreading the situation, attacks the boss and inadvertently makes Kazuma kill him. So in a strange way, Kiryu was the one who killed Kaoru's father. Kiryu telling Kaoru to kill him so she can finally get her revenge over with is surprised when she refuses and simply leaves him be. Hours later in the cold rain, Kiryu is seen reflecting on his words, when suddenly he's stabbed by a mystery assailant. Not gonna lie, this scene, while it comes out of nowhere, is amazingly well done. Bleeding out and weak, Kiryu just barely makes it to Aoi for some medical care. But while that's happening, at the Omi HQ we see Takashima, Ryuji, and Sengoku have a discussion over the events that have occurred thus far. And we also see that, fucking hell, they kidnapped Haruka. This poor girl just can't catch a break, can't she? As Kiryu wakes up, he finds a note in his jacket telling him straight up that it was Sengoku who took Haruka, and on his way to look for her, he gets ambushed, which to Kiryu is just a pre-workout. After being given the quite literal runaround and kicking the ever-loving shit out of a perfectly normal mahjong player, we finally arrive at Sengoku's hideout, and holy shit. Well, anyways, after Kiryu beats up a bunch of samurai, ninja, and a fucking tiger with his bare hands. Oh, I'm sorry, 2 tigers with his bare hands, my apologies. Sengoku, having just witnessed the wrath of God, decides to run away with Haruka in tow. He then runs into Ryuji, who swiftly kills Sengoku for ever daring to bring Haruka into this rivalry he's created. Again, hinting at a strange honor code he has regardless of his ruthless nature, but I'll save that for later. While there, Ryuji finally lays it all out for Kiryu. In 2 days, Kamurocho goes up in flames. After he leaves, we see that Kiryu is still feeling the effects of the stabbing from the night previous. So, yeah, if you're keeping track, Kiryu beat up an army of samurai, ninjas, and 2 fucking tigers bleeding out. This guy makes Rambo look like Willy Wonka. As Kiryu gets patched up from Haruka, Kaoru finds a letter from her adoptive mother, the owner of Aoi. I meant to mention it sooner, but she doesn't really do anything in this game, so it doesn't really matter. And it's here we learn that her father is not dead at all. In fact, he's alive and kicking. Well, that kind of throws a wrench into their whole Korean heritage she had. Or does it? Well, we then get our obligatory waste time side quest with the producer trying to make Haruka an idol, which usually I wouldn't give the time of day, but the scenario plays out kind of makes me think the side quest was just an insane coincidence or an amazing bit of foreshadowing. But we'll get more into that in the discussion section. As soon as that's all over, Kiryu then gets a call from Kurahashi, one of the fabled last survivors of the Jingo-one Mafia raid, telling him he's taking pretty much everyone hostage at the Millennium Tower, and he better hurry up quick or the whole thing is going to go up in flames. What is it with this game and wanting to blow everything up? Anyways, so once we arrive and give him the old 1-2, the reveal is finally, well, revealed. Kaoru does indeed have Korean blood in her, but it's not from her father's side. It's from her mother's. And her father is Kawara, who had a child with the Jingo-one boss's wife. So, a quick scuffle with Kurahashi later. Oh, I'm sorry, I tend to get these fights mixed up. Kurahashi kills Kawara and in his dying breaths tells Kaoru everything. He tells her exactly why he stayed away from her for so long was because those were the dying wishes of her mother Suyeon, who turns out had another child she gave up before Kaoru in fear. We also find out that one night whilst Kawara was away on duty, the Jingo-one found and killed Suyeon, which prompted Kawara to go on this insane killing spree of anyone who has anything between the Jingo-one or of a Jingo-one descent. Not only to get revenge, but to hopefully protect Kaoru from the curse left behind from her heritage. So after Kawara dies, we pick up the next day, and the crew speculate on the revelation of the missing child revealed to them just prior. and a CD that Date found, hoping to analyze it further, giving it to Kaoru. We cut briefly to the remaining Omi Alliance chairmen, all preparing for the final chapters of their master plan, with Goda and his men in tow, and Takashima having seemingly more up his sleeve than he first let on. As Kiryu and Sayama have what seems to be a final heart-to-heart, and honestly a nice, well-deserved kiss, Sayama leaves for Osaka and Kiryu gets a call from Kazuki. Yeah, remember him? He's finally woken up from, getting shot, and had some urgent news. Whilst he was in isolation, he overheard his captors talking about what exactly their plan was. And, well, their plan was to blow Kamurocho up with 33 bombs. I mean, sure, a bit overdramatic, but I guess if it works. After that bombshell, no pun intended, all parties begin their final preparation for the final fight to come. And with a little help from Majima, quickly find all the bombs to disarm them. While that happens, Kiryu goes around town beating up any Goryu that have seemingly begun their attack, and eventually leading him face to face with Ryuji, who explains that he himself had nothing to do with the bombs, and that Jinguan have begun to act independently of him. After the confrontation with Ryuji and his men, Kiryu finally wakes up from his exhaustion and being told by Daigo that Majima took it upon himself to disarm every other bomb in the city, which leads to... well, I guess Majima's dead now. Cutting back to Kaoru cracking the old CD Date gave her, she uncovers a seemingly shocking truth about Ryuji, which we'll come back to later. Back at Purgatory, Majima, of course still alive and kicking, and for some reason Haruka, all meet up back there. Kiryu finalizes his plan to attack Ryuji, and whilst discussing things with Date and Sudo, we get yet another bombshell. It turns out the missing child of Suyon was Ryuji himself, which, you guessed it, makes Kaoru and Ryuji brother and sister. And as soon as this is dropped on us, Kaoru comes in and seemingly lies that she couldn't get into the CD and tells Kiryu that the chief of the Osaka police wants to meet him right away. At the station, Kaoru left a final goodbye to Kiryu and Date, revealing that she not only knows Ryuji is her brother, but is hell-bent on confronting him herself and putting him under arrest to stop this war. As Kiryu arrives in Kamurocho, he finds the place filled to the brim with Jinguan henchmen, so after fighting his way to Kamurocho Hills, he finds Kaoru with Ryuji at gunpoint. As Kaoru reveals the truth to Ryuji, Chairman Goda returns to corroborate the entire story. Seemingly confused, like anybody would be, Ryuji says he no longer cares about any of that and simply has one thing in mind: the complete takeover of Kamurocho and the defeat of Kazuma Kiryu. After their fight, we hear a familiar voice. It's Terada, seemingly alive and well. How does he beat death? By faking it, of course, and it turns out this entire war was a part of his master plan, as he himself is the final survivor of that raid 26 years ago, explaining that he knew the truce and the talks of it would set Ryuji off enough to go to war, and he used this to enact his plan to finally take revenge. He also reveals, what else, a huge-ass bomb enough to destroy the entire city. So, after whatever the fuck this fight is, everything seems fine and dandy with Terada finally defeated. But it can't be a Yakuza game without one last big turn. And as Kiryu gets shot, again, we see Takashima, who also takes out Terada, finally enacting his plan to not only take over the Tojo and Omi Alliance, but as well the Jinguan and, at this point, all of Asia itself. With Terada's last breath, he leaves everything to Kiryu to save the day as he activates the bomb. Kind of a dick move, but alright. So mere seconds before Takashima can land the final blows on Kiryu and Kaoru, Ryuji, not too dissimilar to Nishiki, sacrifices his own body to kill Takashima. Finally, Ryuji and Kiryu stare each other down, the bomb activated, quickly counting. The two dragons, injured, wounded, and on their last breaths, finally decide to duke it out, to find out who can be the one true dragon of the Yakuza. After their epic battle concludes, Kaoru and Ryuji have one final heart-to-heart before he passes away in his newly found sister's hands. Kiryu, in no better shape, can barely even move when Date comes to his rescue. So instead of going onto the helicopter, he uses his last moments to embrace Kaoru and come to peace, awaiting their finale. Okay, no, they don't die, because apparently Terada took out a piece of the bomb that would have actually made it blow up. A cop-out? Yeah, But I guess we did need a way not to kill Kiryu, plus it's not like they didn't completely ignore this or not foreshadow it at the end there. So, hey, thumbs up. The end. Whew. Well, shit. What isn't there to say about this story? It's fantastic. It's essentially one story fully realized in some aspects. Everything from its characters to its pacing to the quality of the drama is above and beyond the first game. The plot, including the Jingoan and the Omi, feels much more fleshed out than the Omi did in 1, even to the fact that the Omi in this game are not cut and dry bad guys who just want money and to rule the world and anything like that. We have people who are straight up evil, but like Chairman Goda and even to a small extent Ryuji, are more gray, who will do what needs to be done, but don't go to such an extent that they would be seen as inhumane or barbarous. As well as the mystery in this game just being much better paced and fleshed out than the last one, with them keeping the Jingo shrouded in mystery for the most part and slowly but surely discovering what they are and how they operate, just how disgusting they can be. Also bringing in how Ryuji and Kaoru are related, that was just a fantastic twist. It just works on so many levels on top of the Kamurocho Tojo plot. It adds this level of tension to the whole thing to where you aren't really sure where this is going to go or where it'll end up. In fact, there are times in this game where you think the worst will happen, which feels great when the heroes finally come out on top. Honestly, the climax of this game, chapters 13 to 16, some of the best writing this franchise has to offer, culminating in a finale that honestly is still in my top 5 final chapters in the franchise. That is including the side games, by the way. Yes, the ending is very cop-out-ish, and honestly, I share that same thought wholeheartedly. Especially since when you think about it, this game, if they wanted to, could have been the end. It could have just stopped here if they wanted to, since everything seems to be wrapped up in one way or another. Sure, there are little tiny loose ends, but for the most part, everything is pretty tight now. Though granted, this does lead into 3 and the problem that it starts bringing into the writing, but I'll wait till then. But let's talk about the characters now, because in this game, it truly does come down to them, and this game does its characters so much justice. But real quick, if a character doesn't do much in this game, or have any significant arc in any way, I won't be talking about them. The only exception would be Kiryu because he is the MC, and, well, he does things in every game. And speaking of Kiryu feels much more fleshed out in this game. No longer this loyal soldier that he was in his younger days, nor a man simply out for answers like he was in 1. He's matured into someone who almost has this strange disillusion to the Yakuza, instead only wanting to protect his new niece, something that does get actually pretty expanded upon in the next game. In fact, the only reason he seems to be in this plot at all is just to pay off the debts that remain with the Tojo clan. It's honestly quite nice to see the change from 1 to 2, and in fact we even begin to see sides of him we really didn't see at all in 1. We see his romantic side, we see his humble side, even a little bit of his emotional side, his weakness, his soul for lack of a better word. He still has his moments of being badass and stoic nature, but you can tell this man has gone through the ringer. And it shows as early as the beginning of the game where he essentially has PTSD over what happened a year ago. Though then again, tell me one person who doesn't have PTSD if they went through something like that. But it's honestly nice to see him grow into this role of a father figure to Haruka, even going as far as to want to give her a life of pamper and wealth during that small mission with the producer. It shows how much he feels for her. It shows how much he's come to care for her. It's honestly a very sweet and touching moment, and nothing else makes me curious on how the relationship will just continue to grow as Haruka herself gets older. And speaking on his emotional side, it's actually kind of cool to see him have a very vulnerable side to him at Kaoru, something I think 1 was sorely missing with how much they left out with Kiryu and Yumi, almost making their relationship, or lack thereof, a bit of an afterthought. And that brings us to Kaoru, a strong woman who, while has a shell around her, slowly allows Kiryu, a man who, by all means, believes that he is responsible for the death of her parents, into her life. And that does lead to her being consistently conflicted, but in a way that feels grounded and realistic, not flip-floppy like some other characters from some other media. But she also brings in a really good dynamic to Kiryu in the sense that she is someone for him to play off of. Give him a partner, see how he works with someone instead of being the lone wolf for his entire game. And as stated before, it gives us a chance to see his emotional side, his vulnerable side, a side that Haruka, by her own admission, only really comes out with her. So you can tell in subtle ways this game makes you root for these two, and the ending is pretty much the ultimate gratification of those hopes. She's honestly one of the best additions this game has to offer in terms of characters. Just don't get used to her though. And that surprisingly leads us into Kawara, her father. His struggle, while barely seen, is felt through the entire game. And the way they slowly reveal his involvement in more than just being a cop on the case is done very, very well. It's so subtle, but it's there, to the point where you might even forget he's part of the story. You might just think, he's just there until, again, another bombshell drops. I could have used a bit more, in all honesty, since some of the stuff he's involved in sort of does come out of nowhere. But for the most part, you can tell how much this guy has gone through and how much he's sacrificed for his daughter. Though a lot of that I sort of give to the excellent voice work, but we'll get to that. And that brings us to Ryuji, or as I like to call him, Nishiki but good. Now, before you bring out the pitchforks and cry bloody murder, hear out my reasonings, okay? Ryuji as a villain does what Nishiki could not in 1. And that is give us a villain who truly feels like he believed what he was fighting for. Nishiki from the outset always felt like a pawn, a piece needed to play for a bigger role, and in the end he died somewhat needlessly for something we aren't really sure if he believed in or not. He felt so unsure of it all that it came off as, flat sometimes. Not to mention his jealousy, it kinda did come out of nowhere. Ryuji, however, comes in with his heels already firmly planted to the ground. He knows he wants this, he knows how to get it, and he knows he's going to do everything he needs to get it. He fully believes that he and he alone deserves the throne. And while doing so, he gives us a look into how villains in Yakuza sometimes aren't just evil. Because while Ryuji does ruthless things, he doesn't come off as gratuitous. He doesn't come off as someone who cannot be reasoned with. He still has a base moral code, a foundation that he will not betray. No other scene presents this better than his release of Haruka. You can tell from the little words he says and how he says them, he is disgusted in the fact that he had Kiryu in front of him, not because Kiryu wanted to settle the score, but because Sengoku stole his kid. To Ryuji, he finds it cowardly, unwarranted, so much that he killed Sengoku for it. He is, as I can call, a classic Yakuza. And even though he did die, he died in an honorable way. He went down fighting the man he aspired to defeat, the man he saw as his final goal, the man who he knew if he couldn't beat, being the Omi chairman meant nothing. And that, just that alone, makes him feel so much more satisfying when you do beat him. Because when you defeat him the first time, you can tell how overconfident he is in his own abilities. Now that he sees you as a stepping stone, he now wants to defeat you. Not for his goals, but for his own pride, his honor. And the game allows you to truly understand how he feels with very little words. It makes the fight that you have with him at the end of the game mean that much more. More gravity to it. The punches you throw aren't just to beat some punk on the street. These are punches meant for an equal. No longer just a common villain. This man is someone who you feel has gone beyond that. And because of that, he feels like such a worthy rival to Kiryu. Honestly, fantastic villain. As for everyone else, they play their part fairly well. Date, as always, is just old and wants to go home. Haruka gets kidnapped, but only once, so I count that as a win. And the Stardust Club, while a footnote to the game, do give some nice world building. And Majima, as usual, is fantastic and easily a highlight whenever he's on screen. I shall say this now. I will only be talking about the voice acting in this game due to it being the first time we are introduced to the Japanese cast. After this, all the other games are pretty top-notch, so I won't really need to be talking about the voice acting from here on out. Until we get to like Judgment and 7, so we got a ways to go. But yes, this game is the first game to use the Japanese cast on release in America, and my goodness, is it fantastic. Takaya Kuroda does an amazing job at Kiryu. His voice has such a heavy bass sound to it that it commands you to listen to it at all times. It's smooth but harsh.
どんな結果であろうと俺が全てを受け止めてやるだから何があっても帰ってこい
And of course, we have Hidenari Ugaki, who I couldn't do this video without mentioning him as Majima. Truly fantastic and brings that level of sane insanity to the role that we all have come to love.
どうやキリュウちゃんかっこええやろ
たくあんただけは読めねえな
さあ今度は正々堂々勝負しようやないか
And everyone else sounds pretty much great. Yudaiki as Sayama, Rie Kugamiya as Haruka, Masami Wasaki as Ryuji, and so on and so on. All fantastic performances. Graphics-wise, there isn't much to say, really. There are definite improvements, a lot of textures are updated, and the lighting is definitely better. But given that this game came out quite literally a year after 1 in Japan, I didn't expect a total graphic overhaul. We'll wait till 3 to tech to that one. Music in this game is fantastic. Amazing, in fact. They took what worked in Yakuza 1 and enhanced it. It helps that a lot of the music is played by actual instruments too, and not just synths this time around. And it covers a wide variety of music. Jazz, pop, rap, rock, even electronic. All in there. And this game introduced a lot of songs that are still surprisingly being used to this day. No, seriously, the Sotenbori battle theme? Still used in Yakuza 7. 7! Now that right there tells you that it's a great song. And not only that, but this game introduced possibly one of the best final boss themes ever. Well, at least it's in my top 3. The song, A Scattered Moment. A beautifully somber song that just oozes emotion. And that is to say nothing about the other excellent tracks. The Jinguan Mafia theme, the normal fight theme. Hell, the startup screen is insanely well done. The startup screen music. It is a complete feast for the ears, and I sincerely suggest going out to listen to the soundtrack and listen to the original versions, because there are some versions in Kiwami 2 that are not great. So exploration in this game is really well done for the most part. The map in this game, it's huge. And not only that, but there are 3 maps in total. 4 if you really want to count the Tojo HQ, I personally don't. And they all feel different, and all have different things to do and see. It's insane how much they packed into each map without feeling redundant or empty. Hell, there are some things exclusive to some parts of the map. It's incredible how much they improved on one's map in just a year. I really can't sing the praises of this enough, though I do have a complaint, and granted it's not a complaint specific to this game. It's something I should have brought up in 1, actually. And that is the camera. This game has a fixed camera angle for pretty much all the overworld stuff, and let me tell you, it gets annoying. You mostly notice it in exploration since most fights don't have fixed cameras, which in and of itself is an issue we'll get to. But the amount of camera cuts that happen in this game is so jarring. In fact, there are times where it's so bad, it screws me over by purposefully throwing me into a fight on the street when I am trying to avoid them at all costs. How does it do this? By changing the camera angle at the wrong time and flipping my controls to shove me right into an enemy. Yeah, it flips your controls. But, speaking of the fighting, is it better than 1? Does it improve the issues? Well, let me tell you. This game does improve a lot in a lot of aspects. One being the fact that it's way easier to hit things behind you because now you have a skill that is instantly given to you at the beginning of the game, unlike the last game. Not only that, but it does feel a lot faster compared to 1, and just feels more fluid, more intuitive, and it feels like you have a lot more control of Kiryu than you did in the last game, where you kind of just fell at the mercy of the game. In fact, a lot of the issues I had with the last game concerning the weird jank is better. And hell, some things even began here, like extreme heat and QTEs. Yeah, the QTEs that we all know and love now began in this game, and honestly, really damn fun. But sadly, where this game improves, there are still problems. Even new ones. For one, the lock-on is still not great. Better than the first game, but not by much. In fact, this game does have the problem of Kiryu being locked into something that is nowhere on the screen. And the problem of being locked into a single combo still persists. In fact, in some situations, I would say it's worse. In certain situations, Kiryu feels like he's almost slowed down during the finish of his combo and is always left open to the enemy attack. And this isn't like me doing some crazy big combo that would leave me open. It's just a basic 3-punch combo. It honestly kind of feels like I'm playing a fighting game where I'm the one who's lagging like shit. But then we get to the enemies themselves. My god, it's kind of shocking. So at first it's not so bad. Easy fodder with some variation in size and speed and moves like we did in the last game. Until 2 things happen. 1, they introduce what I like to call the super heavyweights. These guys don't flinch, they don't get knocked down, and they always tank your hits. Yeah, they take damage, but they easily break out of anything that you throw at them. Not only that, but they have no cooldown to their attacks, which means they can juggle you the moment your iframes from getting up go away. And those go away fast. And when there are more than one of them, oh boy, it's honestly scary. Now, there is a single move that can help alleviate these enemies learned later in the game in an optional side quest, but 2 things. It's a counter that uses a meter of heat, which you can't use consistently, by the way, and 2, these guys usually aren't the only enemies on screen, so you will inevitably use it on someone you don't mean to who's attacking at the exact same time. Which brings us to the biggest issue of the combat. The dogpiling. This game introduces enemies that are extremely aggressive, and while on the surface that isn't too bad, the problem lies with how consistent their barrage of attacks are. And couple that with enemies that basically cover all the bases of speed, style, and type, you can end up in a situation where the moment you get up, you could be getting a quarter or more of your life taken away by a single barrage of enemies, with no way of countering it, or even getting out of it. Again, yes, you do have the Komaki counter, but as said before, it's limited, and the enemies usually dogpile on you when you're getting up, because the game's iframes only seem to exist when you're on the ground and not recovering. Granted, there are moves that help you with this, like a quick recover and even a kick that can be done whilst recovering, but unless you're leveling up only that one aspect that has that move for Kiryu, and even then it'll take forever, you will never have enough XP to get those before late game. Hell, me playing just through the story normally, I got the downed kick after chapter 14, which at that point didn't really help much anyways. It's really unfortunate since I think for the most part, it does improve a lot that 1 seemed to fail at. But it also seems they got just a little too ambitious with trying new things, while they should have just been focused on trying to fix old problems. Now, that isn't to say that the boss fights suffer from this, except for Kurahashi and Terada, which are essentially just the exact same fight, and Kurahashi, I'm sorry, but that's just a copy-paste of Jingu, which is hilarious. But, for the most part, all the other boss fights are pretty fantastic. Just a couple of highlights. Shindu's a nice multi-layer fight that at the time was really experimental for the series with all the QTEs. Daigo's a great introduction to the bigger mechanics of the game, and honestly, let's not forget Ryuji, that you fight 3 times. And of course, all 3 times are harder than the last. In fact, just a little warning, if you go into the last fight, against Ryuji, ill-prepared like I did, you're going to get your shit wrecked. And I mean wrecked, unless you're some kind of god at this game. And I'll be man enough to admit, I almost switched to easy mode for this fight because, my god, he was massacring me. Honestly, this game shines the most in its boss fights. Something going forward you'll see a lot of is, in a weird way, I'd almost akin this to Kingdom Hearts, in the sense that while the core fighting mechanics are usually solid with a bit of jank, the boss fights almost never underdeliver, and it's honestly really fun. There's just something so satisfying about these fights, I can't put it into words. There's something so, I don't know, there's this weird sense of accomplishment when you beat these guys. Pretty much everything from 1 is back. The gambling, the UFO catchers, the batting cages, the bitches, the fight club, all that good stuff. But there are some new additions like bowling, which I think is shit. Or maybe I'm shit. I don't know. And, well, this nifty arcade game that is basically combat in first person. Ever wonder why Yakuza's not in first person? Play this and you'll know. As an entire package, Yakuza excels in some places and still fails in others. While it is an extremely vast improvement over the first one, I think there are some things in it that hold it back from being that much greater. As I said before, like, the combat still feels a little bit janky, but there are kernels there that just work. But on the flip side, the story is just fantastic. It's honestly, to this day, still one of the best stories Yakuza has ever told. And that is a very high bar considering the caliber of games that this series has given us. Hell, this was a deliberate decision, by the way. Toshihiro Nagoshi said that one of its goals for Yakuza 2 was to provide a deeper dramatic storyline. So it's quite impressive, honestly. And the fact that they did this in over just a year, it's still a very commendable effort. And again, for all its shortcomings, it has a lot of things I agree with. The music, the art style, the storytelling, the pacing, the characters, everything about the presentation is beautiful. And again, as I said, the fighting is not one. It is not disgustingly bad. It is not unplayable. It's not the amount of jank from that one. But there are still problems. But even then, honestly, I recommend this game wholeheartedly. 100% recommend it. Because even for its jank, even for its weird design choices, there is so much to enjoy about this game. There's so much to like about this game that if I were to say to skip it, or if I were to say, don't go buy it, don't go play it, don't just skip it, whatever, that would essentially rob you of one of the greatest games in this franchise. And that is with full knowledge that Kiwami 2 exists. And trust me, after playing this, wow, it really opened my eyes to what Kiwami 2 is and how much of a fucking disappointment that game is. But I will not speak anything more of that game now. We'll get to it when we get to it. But yeah, overall, I recommend it. I mean, I don't know, grade-wise, fuck it, give it a fucking A. It's a great game. It's a great game. Just remember, there is jank, but if you're going in for the story, you will not be disappointed. So, that's it, everybody. Thank you again for watching this really long review. It took me a lot of work to do this. But, as I said in the server, and I think I'll just say it here as well, I will be doing this thing where I review a Yakuza game and then a game of my choice, just so I don't get burnt out. So yeah, the next game I'm going to be reviewing, my solo shot game I'm going to be reviewing, Catherine. a game that I have loved since high school, and that I would love just a chance to splurge over it, but also talk about it in a very objective manner. So next time we meet, we will be talking about Catherine. So if you liked what you listened to today, if you like what you saw today, please give us a like, please give us a comment, please give us a subscribe, and I will see all of you in the next one. Bye-bye.